Welcome everyone to Beyond Digital Luxury Talks. So we are here to discuss the future of luxury. I'm Raquel Silva, and with me is my co-host Bettina Serhosh. Today we'll be talking about the luxury market in South Korea with our special guest Dominika Kustosz-Lee. Welcome, Dominika. Thank you for being here with us. How are you doing today?
Oh, it's a good day in Seoul. Evening. So it was a good day.
Good to hear. For those who don't know you, could you tell us a little bit briefly about who you are and what do you do?
Yes. So to put it in the context of South Korea, I've been here for 16 years. I have studied Korean language and culture before I came here. And for the past 7 years, I've been working as a business development consultant. I also have a background in fine art. And some 2 years ago or so, I have decided that I really wanted to combine my professional experience with, like I said, my background in art. And that's when I noticed that my favorite Korean artists are working with luxury brands. And so decided to pursue an executive master in luxury, just like you did. And started my own company, a consultancy where I basically both help Korean Western companies enter the Korean market or work on related initiatives for luxury brands.
Great. Thank you for introducing. So I have a first question, if I may. So what do you think from your experience in the Korean market are successful brands, and why do you think they did well and why did they struggle?
Yeah. So I think there are a few examples that will really, I think, help showcase how even some of the most successful brands, they really do need to adapt their strategy for the Korean market because it's quite unique. And so there are two brands I think that really are very well known and will help illustrate this example. And so I think Chanel, it's right now they are the number one brand in terms of revenue from the Korean market. They have dethroned Louis Vuitton, who took that spot for before. And I think it's really thanks to a mixture of things that they implemented. So that's both the fact that they have a great artification strategy here. Basically, they support local craftsmanship. They are funding an initiative carried out by Yale, which is a Heritage Preservation Institute that focuses on craftsmanship. And so they sponsor the Artisan of the Year and the Young Craftsman of the Year initiatives. And so really they make it big. They help showcase these artists. And they also have another thing related to art, the Frieze and Kiev Korea International Art Fair, so that they have events around that time. So they really showcase that dedication to the Korean art market. And then they also, I think, Chanel has had I think a bit of a difficult past few years, I think, with how they scaled up their production. And I've really seen them address that issue, I think, especially in Korea, where they have, they really are a dominant player in the market. So they have recently opened their atelier where Korean consumers can now take their Chanel items and have them serviced directly in the country. Before that, it would be their third party or sending them to a different location, a different country. And that would be obviously either very expensive or very, and so now they have this beautiful location where it's both brand experience and you actually see the people working on repairs. And I think they're able to kind of make sure that people feel like, okay, the brand also values the purchase, right? And so I think that was one of the great things. Their pop-up stores, they always are just honestly on a different level. They take whole spaces, create rooms after rooms of experiences and make them really fun as well. For example, one of their latest pop-up stores had a gaming room inside where you could do Pac-Man Chanel style and also a memory game Chanel style. So I thought it's, because in Asia, more so than I think anywhere else in the world, there are a lot of gamers. And so that was really fun because you could see that people were really enjoying these games. So I think they really create these amazing initiatives where Korean consumers feel appreciated. But also another thing that they did is there is this mega app in Korea called Kakao Talk, and so that's basically the whole country is on it. It's really the number one Uber app, and they also have a gifting platform where you can gift your friend something, purchasing out via that store. And so Chanel actually entered that store for their jewelry and fine jewelry and watches, which I think is I think it was the first platform where they did that globally. Because if you know Chanel, they're quite conservative when it comes to digital, in the sense where they pledged never to go, use e-commerce to sell their items, right? But so for the fine jewelry, I checked, and you still cannot purchase it in app, but still you can go, we can check, and you have a direct number that you can get connected to the customer service to inquire about the item. So I think kind of admitting how important this channel is to the market, I think it was a very important thing. And like I said, it really probably contributed to the fact that they are at the top. And for struggles, I think, again, similar, is also a French brand, Sephora. I think they unfortunately lacked a bit of humility coming here to the market. I think that they had actually a great start because Koreans are very well versed in foreign brands and they travel a lot. So they always went to go shop, at Sephora whenever people leave. They just always went to Sephora. So they knew it very well. And there was a lot of excitement about the launch initially. But this year, I think after around 5 years on the market, they withdrew. There are several issues, I think, that caused that. Basically, they were pretty late to join that Kakao gift store. That's one of the things. And especially, I think, if you are a selective retailer and not one of the, top Uber luxury brands in a sense, I think you should have basically more open to explore these kind of channels. And unfortunately, it took them quite a long time to join. And also when one of the stores was near where I live, and honestly, throughout the years that it was there, I never noticed it change. And beauty, especially in Korea, is such a saturated market. You really, have to be experience focused because everyone else is. And so, for example, Olive Young, the local number one pharmacy, they always change up their stores. They have a lot of initiatives. And so obviously when Sephora entered, they also kind of responded to that entry into the market, inviting more kind of luxury premium brands into their store. So they changed up their offer a bit, but also they just, kept really looking for hot new skincare brands and makeup brands, and they always changed. And Sephora, unfortunately, the store that I would go to, they always just had the same displays, the same brands. And I think it's just not enough, especially in such a really highly saturated market. So I think just being used to the fact that they are number one wherever they go and not taking into consideration the local dynamics, unfortunately resulted in a situation where they just couldn't be here anymore. So that was quite unfortunate. Not the first time. For example, Boots is another case of pharmacy store that also had to exit the country for a few years here, right? So I think you just have to respect that this is a very concentrated market where things happen a lot, and you need to understand that there is this need for constant change for great customer experience, and digital plays a very big role in that as well.
Wow. So you touched on so many things in this answer. I have so many more questions. But yeah, first, thanks for this assessment at the beginning. I think what's also important for me is to understand, like when you mentioned at the intro, you are also an artist, right? So it would be lovely to hear what your insider perspective is on the luxury business as you referred to the collaborations.
Yeah, sure. So I think it's a very fertile ground for such collaborations. And that's, like I said, for me, was kind of that turning point in my career recently where I finally understood how to combine all these different things that I was doing in my life. And Korea is, it's well known for K-pop and so on, for even for Netflix movies. But actually, I think that what it did really well is it could have stopped there. But the investment that went into culture from both also the government side, from all of these companies that really put a lot of effort into becoming global players, that also paved the way, for fine art to shine more. Like I said, could have stopped at the kind of mass culture, but it went beyond that, and it's beautiful. I think it's a very fertile ground for that. I think also because Koreans, I think the focus on the economic development over the past 70 years, that meant that the finer things in life were not the focus, right? Of when you're really kind of trying to bring the country up from being the poorest in the region or in the world, if I remember correctly, to one of the top global players. So there was a concentration of work, everyone was focusing on the economy, and there was a hunger. I think that the Korean nation is a very expressive nation, and I think there was just this need for expression, pent up need. And you can see that now that the ground is more fertile, now that you have a lot more eyes on Korea, now that the government actually for the past 30 years actually has been really investing continuously in culture, people more and more, they try to actually do something, and you have young people learning traditional arts, and it's great. And I think that pent up energy and how prolific Korean artists are, it's a great marriage, between that aspect and then luxury brands, who obviously very often are also patrons. It's part of the marketing as well. But I think that a lot of these luxury leaders, they're actually very eloquent people that have, read a lot. They're very well versed in culture, and they have that that need also to be connected to the finer things in art, in life. So basically, in Korea, a lot of these companies were able to establish beautiful partnerships, be that with artists specifically. So here you would have Dior, who so far they have partnered with 24 Korean artists. There was a large exhibition last year, Lady Dior celebration. And then you also have Louis Vuitton, who partnered with one of the top Korean fine artist painters for their Arctic Capucine bags. And then also with another designer who created one of their trunks with traditional Korean inlays, which was also very beautiful. Then you also have, like mentioned before, Chanel, who partnered with the Heritage Preservation Institute, but also then you have Cartier, who also partnered with another institute and is actually, I think starting 2015, has been funding research into traditional fabrics, something that was almost completely lost. And now actually I went to an expo last week and saw that this fabric will probably be commercialized. So you'll also kind of see this beautiful thing where they helped preserve a big part of Korean culture, and now they'll be able to bring it back into daily life almost, right? So I think these are really very noteworthy initiatives. And then you have also Gucci, for example, who also did a very smart thing, because the Seoul Art Week that starts in September, it's quite actually saturated by now with all of these initiatives. But they decided to do like a Gucci Culture Month. And so just after the Art Week ends, they have a month of their own initiatives. I think will be a beautiful way to kind of extend that week. And also they have partnered with the main palace here in Korea, and they're funding some of the conservation efforts for the main palace. Again, I mean, helping to preserve a culture that has also been damaged, many times. I think it's a beautiful cause, and also beautiful lifestyles. But I feel inspired by what's happening here in Denmark. Yeah, and so but like I said, it's a mix of a lot of different stakeholders that come together to make sure that this is a thriving industry. And like I mentioned, I was at this expo last week. It's actually a hanbok expo, hanbok being the traditional Korean garment, the clothing. And it's sponsored and organized by government institution. And you would really kind of almost not know it when you looked at the fashion show that was part of the opening ceremony, because you had Vogue models actually walking the fashion show, which was faces that I've known from magazines. I saw them up close, and then the video, both the promotional video for the fashion show event, the video was really created in a way that I think a lot of companies would have been very proud to have a video like that represent their company. So, and this is a government institution. So I think it really kind of shows that Koreans really take pride in their content and put a lot of effort in it, and actually go and source the best people even for a government event, right? So there's a lot of things that play together. And it's a very dynamic and very interesting thing to witness.
And I think it's also important that it's authentic, right? So that the brand can relate, or the other way around, the artist can relate to the brand. I think it's very critical in this context.
Yes, and also what's really nice is that, a lot of these brands, luxury brands, will have Korean K-pop ambassadors. And because many of these people actually collect art, then even outside of the official events, they will interact with these artists, go to the exhibitions and have some exchange with them, which I think makes it even more amazing, because it's something that definitely was not planned, but yet is happening because there is just so much value put in art. Even, like for young people, they are collectors as well. So it's great to see, like I said, both the authentic, very sometimes non-commercial investment that these brands are making, but also the whole kind of brand universe coming together and then playing.
It seems the South Korea market is it's overlooked when seeing their neighbor countries from China and Japan. What luxury brands, since we talk about a lot about consumers, what would you say luxury brands have to think about strategically, or in terms of activations, more on the digital side, to attract these modern luxury affluent consumers, since they are so discerning, so into the new technologies, but also the details, and also write about their own culture? What would you say would be strategies brands could implement right now to tap into this pool of people?
Sure. I think, first thing that you have to do is kind of also look at the homegrown brands now. Because I think more than ever now, I can really see some really well-established Korean brands like Gentle Monster or Tambourines, which is a sister brand, a skincare or a beauty brand. And they are setting the tone. There is also another brand called Other Error, where they're more of a street fashion brand, futuristic fashion brand. But also when you just look at their store experiences, you understand how important technology, seamless integration between offline and offline, how important it is, and kind of the standard of experience that Koreans are used to. Because the store cannot just be a store. And I know that everyone is talking about experience and, how retail had to go through a transformation, but really it's just on another level when you go into these stores. And you kind of almost forget that you're there to shop, and it becomes a whole experience. And so I think kind of understanding what the Korean consumer is used to, that's kind of your first step. And then the technology element, even brands, like I said, like Chanel, that typically still e-commerce is not big for them, probably never will be, or unless, maybe in like a few decades from now, maybe that will change, or a decade from now. Not still for example, with Dior, and right now I'm traveling for the same program that you graduated from, right? So I went to, for example, to Dubai, the Mall of the Emirates. And for class, we went to Dior, and their largest, I think, one-story location. And it's beautiful, but there is no tech inside. However, when I went to one of their concept stores here in Seoul, they have technology everywhere. And it's really kind of working with sitting on well integrated into the store. So, for example, such simple things as a screen, digital screen in the coffee shop, so they're able to change the atmosphere depending on the season, since it's a concept store. So right, the interior changes quite a lot. And then you also, there was a screen behind one of the mannequins, so you could see the fashion show where the look that was being shown, where that was being showcased. And then one of my favorite things was the table where, and again, these aren't super like difficult technologies, but they're just really, it shows how they're leveraging them for the right purpose, which I think is like the best way to try to use technology. So for example, there was a table where you could select one of the embroidered bags, and digitally. You could select them from portfolio, type in the initials or name you would like to see embroidered on the bag, which is then being done for you both on the table and on a screen in front of you. And then it would be shown to you how it's done. You would get a QR code to scan. You would be able to download that image onto your phone and kind of have that visualization, your bag, how it will look like, right? So I thought that was really interesting because, again, some of these things are not necessarily only for the Korean market in a sense, right? You can really implement them somewhere else, but you can see that basically these brands are just pushed to think a bit differently than in other countries, because the very unique infrastructure in Korea really pushes people to the brands think a bit differently, because the telcos in Korea, they really make it easy for people to switch to newer and newer phones all the time. And so everyone has a really great smartphone. The internet, kind of the whole system is amazing. So you basically never have issues with connection, even like in the deepest of the deepest subway lines, you have a perfect connection basically. And also people have these amazing devices and this always working basically internet. So interacting with things, it's online, it's just, obvious. So it's really good when companies are able to acknowledge that and incorporate that into whatever experience they're creating for their audience. There's just so much more that you can add on for fun to just make it more engaging, right? And so I think kind of understanding that element, plus geography, basically the whole metropolis, right? This whole metropolis, it hosts half of the country. So, and here is where most of the activations are happening. So again, also you have all these people exposed to a lot of different activations, so they get used to certain standards. So you just have to innovate all the time. And again, it doesn't have to be super complicated, and you don't have to go against your brand DNA or anything like that. It's just about just kind of constantly thinking, how could I really excite my audience? What else could there be? Because there's a lot of people to work with, make it authentic, right? There's a lot of different technologies you could look at and select the best one for you. So it's not about, just being too much. There's lots you can do that is still in line with who you are as a brand.
Yeah. And when you think about these brands, like there's probably like some hesitancy of testing things, but do you think like in Korea, it's a good place to test new technologies? Are the people like they are more excited about technology, as we heard? Would they forgive more if things are not going so well and you can adopt quickly and then come up with a new thing? Or could you also think about like technology that is tested that you can bring somewhere else, maybe later on?
So I think a few things to say here is I think it's much more dynamic. So you can, in a sense, probably there is more room for trying out some different technologies, right? To see whether it resonates with your audience or not before you go somewhere else. So definitely in that sense. But on the other hand, because like I said, people have these amazing devices in their hand and the internet is working basically flawlessly most of the time, you cannot, you just need to make sure that things are tested well before they're implemented. Because even like after more than 1 second of your page not loading, you get annoyed because it's not normal, right? So there's a certain level of technological maturity that is required. But at the same time, I think definitely because this country is kind of it's really, people are really, really used to having constantly new to use. Like, I remember reading, I think it was 2019, that the average Korean person would have like 6.8 apps installed on their phone, right? And I'm sure it's similar or maybe even higher. It was for shopping apps, sorry, not other apps. So, and they get used to these seamless experiences on these apps. And live commerce is a big thing here. So people kind of enjoy really going online and interacting with brands. And I think it's because of that, it's and there is also a speed of fads in a way that come and go in Korea. It's definitely, I think, a more forgiving place to kind of test out your technology, in a sense. Well, still, obviously has to make sense in a way you're able to test, but it's a very also discerning audience. So at the same time, kind of make sure that the vendor you're going with, their technology knows on par with whatever else you're doing. But definitely, you can AR, or any kind of like halogens, I think, right? That's what it's called. A lot of things that you can test out, it'll be kind of just, you can see that in stores already. So it's just kind of applying different things that make sense here. So that cartel testing round.
I liked your gaming example too. I think that's also one where brands can do really well or like really bad. I've seen games that didn't make sense at all, and you were like, what is this? At the same time, if you're doing really well and you have the right partners on hands that can help you with the right technology that like actually meets the expectations of such a mature audience, I think that makes lots of sense.
And it's a great way also for brands to really implement their CRM technology, initiatives, right? Because, for example, because many customers you'll have here coming to your location, apps can be leveraged for reservations. So then you obviously have, it's linked to an account, so you get their data. Then you can check whether they entered, and then you can send them a survey and a reminder about the products that they viewed in store. There is just a really great way for you to inform your CRM initiative as well. So there's a lot of things you could do.
Would you say that focusing more on the local market, but also on the visiting people, how do you see luxury brands making this communication? So on the other hand, you have to cater for these hyper modern tech consumers, which are locals. And then you also have the tourists, people who come and visit. Do you see any other activations or strategies that brands are also now trying to communicate with the tourists who also travel? You mentioned before when we were talking also about the Kakao app, where also brands are trying to attract not only locals, but also people traveling. Maybe you could tell us a little more about.
Yeah, so I think travel it's a bit tricky because the Korean kind of tech ecosystem and all that is really created for the Korean people, and that's where Korea still needs to. The whole infrastructure needs to be changed a lot to be more welcoming to people who are just visiting. Because right now, if you don't have a phone number, it's really hard to exist in this country because it's the number one verification system, and so signing up for anything, it requires a phone typically, and it has to be a Korean phone. So I think there is kind of a limit that is imposed by the country itself in that sense. And then, of course, you have Kakao Talk. That's not a communication channel. But then not everyone who comes here wants to keep that channel, even if they make, because here it's possible to use a foreign, non-Korean phone number to set it up, but then if you don't use it daily, why have it on your phone, right? So I think in the end, you kind of resort to email as that communication channel, or some brands will have their Korean Instagram version, but very often it's just their, kind of one global account.
Dominika, we talked about the Kakao app and also the local market, so the luxury affluent consumers and the consumers in general who shop locally. But what about the tourists? What about the travelers? How can brands also tap into this new market by attracting the tourists which are passing? How can they leverage or are leveraging these apps or maybe CRM on their communication and conversation?
So I think two things were first of all, the whole Korean ecosystem is kind of built for the Korean person. So that's something that really has to change here, I think, and makes it very difficult for some people to continue living here. Because even when you have a Korean number, there are the way you're registered can make it difficult for you to authenticate yourself for bank services and so on. So that's kind of like a bigger issue here in general. And so, but yes, it's quite difficult to function here and sign up even for membership at stores if you don't have a Korean phone number. It's very limiting. And then, like I said, so when you have Kakao Talk channel, you can sign up for Kakao even if you don't have a Korean phone number. But then if you don't have many Korean friends, why would you have that app on your phone? And, in the end, it really doesn't make sense. So brands have to kind of resort to email. I think the kind of traditional, I know it's quite successful still, but it's a pretty traditional way to really contact your consumer base. And then for Instagram or social media, social accounts, then again, if it's in Korean, it's going to be in Korean language probably. Or there might not even be a Korean specific Instagram page because there's only a global one. So it's kind of tricky in that sense. But I think just in terms of also the kind of very techy way of brands interacting with Koreans here and, with the Korean audience, I think it's just also a novelty for people that come here. And I think they want to see that. I was just reading an article the other day about Korean convenience stores. And it's funny because for me, obviously, I've been here for 16 years, so it's normal for me. I've seen these convenience stores become what they are. But I read an article that it was an Australian blogger that some of her most viewed videos are from her just shopping at a Korean convenience store because there's just so much you can do. They have there was recently a collaboration between a Korean convenience store and Netflix for a newly released TV show. And then you have, you can send international packages, you can pay your bills, you can cook your food. So much you can do here, right? So, but I think, again, just shows that people, when they come here, they want to see that. So even if they may be not necessarily, it should be done in a way that makes it possible for everyone that enters your store to enjoy the experience, even if they don't have a Korean phone number. I think at the same time, I wouldn't be necessarily scared of the fact that you might overwhelm a tourist, someone who's just visiting with whatever activation you're having here. Because again, in the end, I think it's there might be some very kind of specific environments, but it's always on brand in the end. Even if it's, the technology doesn't have to be super complicated. And if it is, probably that's also, people go there knowing that this is kind of the experience they're probably going to have because the brand itself has the image, right? So I think, it doesn't make sense for brands to limit themselves in that sense, but they do have to think of, okay, maybe if I just have a QR code and then allows people to sign up via email, that's going to make it open also for tourists. And so they don't feel left out. I think that's, but again, like I said, it is quite limiting in terms of comparing to all types of data you can get from a Korean consumer that is using your services here versus, someone who's only visiting.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's not easy, but the good thing is that there's no PIPL like in China. So you can actually reach out to your clients outside of, like, when they're shopping in Korea, come back. So there's like a little bit of more liberty still, which is great.
Yes, because in the end,
it's a good opportunity for brands. Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I think that makes it also a bit kind of makes Korea quite attractive in that sense, where it is, the political environment is a bit different, very different from China. So at the same time, Korea is more open to the West than, for example, Japan is. So it's that kind of almost, very receptive towards the West, very well aware of Western brands, a really fertile ground for any brands that are interested to enter Asia. I think kind of one of the probably, it's maybe not easiest in terms of doing business. It is quite complicated to succeed here, but at the same time, it's rewarding if you make it. because Koreans are very receptive to Western brands.
And I think, for the tourists, it's amazing to see these like emerging store concepts that you have in Seoul. I was there myself, and the team showed me around. It's amazing what you see there that you see nowhere else, as you said, with like comparison Dubai and Seoul, same brand, completely different experience, more digital, more technology, more like adapt to the clients that are local, right? So super interesting. That brings me to the next question, which is about like this very much hunger for technology, but at the same time, Korea is a super traditional country. So there's very important traditions that are important for the clients there. So can you elaborate a little bit on this tension? Because I think it's quite similar to the tension between like the heritage, the tradition of the luxury brands, and at the same time, like this fast moving technology that is out there. And like, how does Korea bring this together?
I think it's sometimes it's just like a very interesting clash. It's the way, you have these traditional pagodas with high, skyscrapers in the background. They're just in the same location. Or you'll have people in expensive suits eating street food. It is what it is. It's kind of, it has to coexist. You'll have, it's a very, there's a price to pay for being able to, within 70 years, switch, like I said, from being the poorest country in the world to being one of the largest global players. Some of the culture kind of got lost in the sense, if it lost in translation, just in the speed of the change. And then, so there's this contrast also between a generation that, like I said, during the war, people had to eat tree bark. There was nothing else to eat. And now you have a very wealthy society where the difference between one generation is like the same as a few generations in other countries. So it is a country of contrast. I think it's just how it's done. I think there are some things where convenience and the capabilities that technology gives you, they're more important than other things. But then at the same time, you still seek that, that tradition, because it's in the fast pace that was of change. You start missing the more traditional things, right? And some social concepts that just take a very long time to change. And so there is a lot of social issues here as well that still are probably even more pronounced than in other countries where other countries had 200, 250 years to undergo the same changes created in 70 years, right? So it's I think it's a pretty complicated issue, but definitely I think also in Korea you don't have technologies that are just kind of shiny but don't make sense. I think everything that is used well here, it's basically really does make your life easier, and I think that's kind of the best lesson for technology companies in that sense, where in the end your technology has to have a purpose. If you have a purpose, then why have it in the first place? And with tradition, I think, although like I said, it's a bit more complicated here, because then it's also culture doesn't change as quickly as economy and technology. So there is a bit of a clash between where the country is right now in terms of technological progress, but then progress of thought. Some things, they still have to pick up quite a lot. But then I think in terms of luxury, it's also that element where you have that hunger for these things, like that hunger for art and craftsmanship and culture that Korea has. I think that's also in that sense like luxury, right? No matter how much technology is used, we kind of really need that human element. And I was at a academic conference in July, and one of the research presentations that I listened to was talking about tech and luxury, actually, and it said that consumers don't want technology to be at the center of luxury. They want it only for the adjacent elements. So maybe things that enhance the experience, but really what is considered to be the core of technology is like that human element. And I think you can, again, kind of see that where yes, tech is everywhere. You live kind of in the future, but the need and really the amount of culture that you have now in the public space versus even 10 years ago, it just shows that we have that natural hunger for other things in life, right? So it needs to be kept alive, and that's kind of what we'll go back for.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's great that the government is supporting the arts and actually facilitating that people can develop skills in this sense. At the same time, they have like the newest cell phones where they can always like do the gaming, everything that comes to mind that makes sense that the brands are offering, which is a great kind of way of it's a kind of a balance as well for me. Wanted to also talk about, because you said like technology that makes sense and simplified, so I wanted to quickly touch on Naver, which is the mini Google in Korea, which I found really super interesting. And maybe you can quickly say a few things like how this, like, because you just touched on it, this Naver is used.
Yeah, so I think in general, like that digital ecosystem in Korea, it's very Korea focused. So Naver, right, the which is a search engine originally, started as a search engine, but now obviously it's a whole ecosystem. It's still more popular than Google. Google is not able to dominate the Korean market as a search engine, and I think it's because of all the other services that are built into Naver that are not really available on Google. So I think more and more people do use Google for their search, but I think specifically Korean things, you just go on Naver for that, because you just have different categories, either blogs, you will have, and it's really beautifully categorized. Shopping, you will have kind of like this knowledge section where you would have some experts answering your questions. There's just like a really big number of things that you can access through Naver. Also, price comparison, kind of platform. So much that is here, and obviously the advertisement kind of ecosystem being part of that. It's very hard to compete with whatever you come in, when you come in with different technology, because they're already so well established and they know the consumer, right? Because the consumer created it in a sense. So you're not really able to compete with that. And then you also have, for example, in Korea, you don't have Amazon Korea. You have it in Japan, you have it in Singapore, but you don't have a Korean version of Amazon. You will have the local office, but it's only for Korean sellers who are interested in basically selling overseas. And because Korea has its own e-commerce platforms, and Koreans like designs that are created for Koreans. That's how it is. And so WhatsApp, right now, Korea has its own mega app, and you really Uber. I don't know if Uber is even legal here. I think it's not. It exists here. It's a gray area, but I think it's mostly used by people who just come here and they're used to the app. Because I don't think a Korean person really typically has it installed on their phone, because you have Kakao Taxi, right? That is also, and then it's connected to Kakao Maps, because that's rival, of Naver apps. So you just have these ecosystems that are built really understanding. They came out of a need, and it's so hard for companies that were really addressing different set of needs somewhere else to come and take over, right? So eBay, for example, right? eBay came in here and they have, I think, acquired 3 brands or 2 e-commerce platforms and created the third one, ended up also just completely selling that over to eMart, local, also kind of convenience store, supermarket chain, right? So you just see that a lot of these, I think the pace of change, the convenience, the Koreans are very demanding customers. To be able to just address all of these things, unless you are a Korean player, I don't think sometimes it makes sense for other companies to invest in the market. So yes, it's pretty unique in that sense. It's one of the, I think, very few markets in the world where it's not a totalitarian, authoritarian system, and yet has a very distinct ecosystem, right? That it's hard to penetrate for some companies.
So would you say, since we talked about eBay and more focus on the pre-loved topic that it's discussed in terms of circularity, fashion circularity, would you say this is also something consumers are looking for? How is it in the Korean market and the pre-loved for luxury at the moment?
Yeah, I think more and more, definitely. I think it's a big shift also in mindset. Maybe not, luxury, pre-loved luxury, because it in general, yes, because of the higher price, it makes more sense to sometimes buy pre-loved goods. And so that kind of secondhand market has been present in Korea for longer than other ones. But also there is this Korean app called Carrot. And so it's basically kind of like a peer-to-peer platform where you can sell things that you don't want anymore. And within, I think, a 6-kilometer radius, you will have people from within that radius will be able to see the offer and buy from you and so on. And I think that that app also changed the perception of secondhand goods in Korea. And more Koreans are actually leveraging that, where before that, I think was more new. Also because, I think when a country comes out of such poverty, there is this just need kind of to show that now you're better off, so you can afford something new, But I think it's the society that's maturing, so that is also a big part, I think, of a cultural shift here. And so yes, like I said, secondhand luxury has been here for a long time because it's just, I think, intrinsic to the product itself because it's such high value. But yeah, these platforms, they have been expanding and growing over the past, I would say, maybe like 5-7 years, quite a lot. And starting with just leather goods, right, to even fashion platforms, there are quite a lot of kind of pre-loved fashion, luxury fashion platforms that are doing quite well here. So yeah, it was not necessarily something that was super strong before, but with the change, economic, kind of the shift, and also Korea is also not immune to inflation and current market. It's a small market. It's very dependent on the global dynamics. So obviously, whatever happens outside of it influence what happens here, and so people don't have as much discretionary spending as they used to have. So that means that it will turn right to secondhand goods. And so I think that rental also, right, just renting fashion items, that's also becoming more and more popular. Also, definitely a fertile ground for that. I think that the fact also that people live in smaller spaces, it's not possible to really just buy new things all the time because where do you store them? So if you have a special event, it makes much more sense to just rent something and then return it, than keep it and store it in your small solo flat, right? Yeah, I think there's a few interesting things that have been happening here on the market that are really kind of supporting that shift towards pre-loved.
Hey, Dominika, sounds like it's super different to what you experienced when you came from Europe, right? So just like touching on your past, like you came there, you loved it, you stayed there, now you're there, you really love it. Maybe like what's next, or how did you experience the last years when you were in Korea? Do you think you will always be there, you will always stay there, or are you developing somewhere else? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think, I've been here for 16 years. Like I said, I came here as a student. My whole adult life was spent in Korea. It's really funny because my body language, when I'm in an official situation, it turns Korean. I have no control over it. So when I was, for example, with Bocconi, with Emelux, when I was in, we had this module in Milan, where we would spend the whole day within the luxury store to kind of shadow the employees. And I was being introduced, and obviously I was, I walk into a kind of a team of 20 room of 20 people. And so I say hi, and I kept bowing to everyone. It's not, and I said, I'm sorry, I'm really not trying to show you anything, or kind of, I'm not showing off that I came from Asia, God forbid. But it's just, it's such a big part of my body language at this point. The moment I start feeling more official, I bow to people. And like when we were also with MLX in Paris at that craftsmanship kind of academy that Chanel invested in. Again, whenever I feel like someone is an authority to me, I just start bowing to them automatically. So it's a very fun. I do think, in a sense, like obviously, it's never 50-50, but I am bicultural in that sense, because I spent up until I think it was 24. I think that's when I came here, or 23. That part I spent in Poland. But then I came here, and I still came here as a student. And then, even though I had obviously some experience working in Poland, really it was solidified here. And so it was, all the challenges that come from living in Korea as a non-Korean person. I used to speak the language. I was part of the society. I was not an expat living here in that sense. I just went, graduated from university, and kind of, I got married to a Korean person. I started working. I have Korean citizenship, so also I'm not treated as an expat at work, at least not fully. So I am part of just the society in that sense. And so I think, for me, it's a very convenient kind of position, because I am able to kind of code switch whenever I want. But I think, Korea, it's quite a challenging environment for children, and it's not the easiest for family life, which the worst childbirth rate in the world is a good testament, for. And so basically that's kind of my motivation to think about relocating back to Europe, because it's just, for family life, it's quite challenging here. And also I think that I would love to show my daughter a bit of a different side of the world. She's just started elementary school 2 years ago, so she's still she will still adapt very quickly to a new environment. And I think before it gets really, really tough here with education, I would like for her to see a different world. So I'm open to moving. But having said that, Korea was always very good to me. My husband's a musician, so also I was kind of not part of, let's say, mainstream society in terms of my marriage life. It's a pretty unique life that I had. And also, so I was always close to culture. I was able to I majored in fine art here. So I was really close to what I loved the most, and I was able to get the best of both worlds in a sense, right? But I think it's time for a change. It's time to get closer to my family in Europe. I want my daughter to be closer to her grandma, basically. So I'm looking. Yes, that's also why MLX. I'm really trying to reconnect with the Western world to understand. Obviously, I've been working with Western clients to develop their business in Korea, but in the end, it's still really being very close to the Korean culture. And so I wanted to understand more about how Western companies do business in the West. And so I was really able to learn a lot about that. And I think I will be so ready to make that step.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, yeah, very different, but also like when you left Poland, it's probably very different to like how it is right now. You would be probably more Korean now than being back in Poland.
Yeah, it's I went there for the first time in 6 years in June, and it's Poland specifically. I think it's way more on par with Western Europe after so many years in the European Union. I think that we were able to leverage that very well. Obviously, there are some political struggles, so that's another story. But I think in terms of infrastructure, it's really the experience was on par with the other countries I visited for MLX. And yeah, but it is weird for me for some things. I just, like I said, my body does things automatically. And like I said, I was there for the first time in 6 years. And even before I started traveling for MLX, it was for the first time in 5.5 years that I went to Europe. Before that, I went to the US and Japan for a bit in the meantime. But yeah, so it's just, I'm just not used to, my body is not used to that. My thoughts are not used to that. And even such a thing like tipping, it's just, I freeze when I have to tip because you don't tip in Korea. So there was a funny story when my husband and I, because I'm from the western part of Poland, southwest. And so when we went, my husband first came with me to Poland, the whole tipping thing just freaked him out completely. And then we went to Germany. He loves Vans. So we went to the Vans store and he was looking at things and he's like, do I need to tip them here too? Because, there are just some things that I was like, that I knew I don't have to. But at the same time, I'm thinking a lot of the things, how do I not offend people if I tip? What's the standard? There are a lot of things you kind of forget, and you can, that's how you do it. It comes at the same time. There's 16 years, and so there are things that are new that I just don't know. So a lot of my vocabulary is Korean. I never learned it in Polish. I learned it in English maybe, but I never learned it in Polish because I just wasn't like, for example, digital marketing. That's a word that I discovered how what it is in Polish, I think a year ago. Because I just had no use for that. So, yeah, it's a pretty interesting thing to go back and kind of build on your childhood memories and even kind of early adulthood memories with who you are now as a person. It's
Right.
so yeah, but yeah, it's definitely I feel a bit, Korea is very safe. It's, there is, it was a funny story. I was talking, I think, to my husband about, how, because in Korea, when you go to the coffee shop, if you're alone, you need to go to the restroom, you leave your credit card or wallet or phone on the table to just mark that the place is taken. And so I remember just telling my husband, that's not the case in Europe. And then I think it was about maybe I don't know, someone losing a tablet and then not being able to find it. But he's like, and he says, but why would anyone steal that? That's so much trouble. It also doesn't make any sense. It's I guess that social kind of trust, that security, safety. It's also kind of gets you used to a lot of things. I laugh because my bag is always open. People always in Europe they zip up my bag again, and and again that's what I used to before. Not that, but just your body switches to new habits.
But do you thinking that you're gonna keep that bridge to Korea, right? With your business and also with of course your daughter and your husband being Korean or half Korean, right?
Yeah,
And you having the citizenship.
definitely. I mean, that's also why I sent my daughter to Korean school, not to international school, because I really wanted her to, while we're here, be as much as as possible connected to her culture and heritage. And it is there are some things that I just I know I will miss a lot and I want to come back. That's personal, but then business wise, I think I because I've been trying to understand how to make this move back to Europe, because I wasn't looking at Poland. Actually, I wanted to go to a bit more multicultural city for my daughter's benefit, and I was having a hard time kind of finding a good role for myself, because I understood that my skill in the end, the biggest differentiator for me is really that knowledge of the Korean market and not being, for example, able to work with technology. There are different people in Europe that can do that already. So in order to really stay connected to what I love, what I know very well, but also to kind of be able to leverage my skills to the fullest, Korea is, it has to be a big part of my professional path moving forward. So whatever I do, I'm sure that it will be very connected, be that through my own company. It's just projects that I would be then kind of helping maybe design and come back for the execution here later on. We'll see how that plays out. But definitely Korea will continue to be a big part of what I do, because I think, like I said, I feel very lucky to have this experience of, like I said, living as just in a sense as any other Korean person does here. It gives me a lot of insights into the market that other people who maybe don't speak the language and are not here living just as part of society don't have access to, right? So I think, yeah, it would be a shame to let go of that and not help other people, right? Kind of look and try and find their way around the market here.
Thank you for sharing, Dominika. And in the sum up, as a leader, if someone wants to also, like you, take the leap of faith, try new things, try new cultures, what will be your advice for someone who's looking to change, looking to the next level? What would you say from your experience was the key for that?
I think, if placing that in Korea, I think it's still a pretty challenging environment for women. And I think there are a lot of, different studies in the world that show that it's still a tough society for women. Having said that, actually, change is coming, thankfully. Korea, because of the emphasis that it puts on education, has a lot of very well educated women that it's impossible to, I think, to ignore that power at some point. And so at first, I think that the first CEOs would have been in kind of the more typical roles for women, so HR and so on. But and when I was first started working as a consultant in 2017, most women that I met in leadership positions here were probably related to marketing, e-commerce, and so on. More and more now, you will have also women being heads of technology companies. Naver, for example, we talked about Kakao. They have female CEOs. Actually, I think Naver, the first female CEO they had was in 2017, and then they had another one in 2021 or 22. So there is a shift, but it is very challenging. There is no need to sugarcoat that. Like I said, it's just a big shift. It was a very traditional society to begin with Confucianism, and having made that big leap in terms of economy and technology in 60 years, 70 years, what has been more than 200 years in other countries. Some things were just, it's natural that they're not on par with Western standards for women. So I think, having said that, for me as a non-Korean woman here, actually being in the roles that I was in was very rewarding, because I think that there's a kind of like an ambivalent relationship between Korea and the West. And so they love Western culture, but at the same time, I think, there is a certain dominance to European culture, right? That people in Asia also feel. So it's much easier for me to make, I think, connections with Korean, business relationships with my Korean counterparts, because there's this novelty of this non-Korean person speaking Korean. It removes that element of hierarchy that is intrinsic to the Korean language, because we use it. So yes, I'm familiar, but at the same time, they know that if they were to use English, the conversation would have been different, right? So I was really able to kind of leverage all of that and build some really meaningful business connections. And I think because also there's this softer side to a woman, you're not as dominant in that sense. So you're able to have people open up a bit more and talk about their actual business struggles. So you're able to address these pain points, I think, in a better way. And so if I were to talk about female leadership in Korea specifically, I think that's kind of what you could focus on, kind of your, in that culturally sensitive sense, be able to hone in on that kind of the instinct of trying to maybe understand people more, right? And build more lasting relationships and not just come and dominate, right? So I think that could be very helpful when you're doing anything here, and will really help you do business. And Korean business is very relationship focused. So that's why there's a lot.
We have a tradition in the podcast. We are asking the guests what's chic or shoot. And I explain that to you and also to the audience, because they might not know, of course. So I'm going to ask for 2 examples to you, Dominika. Chic, that's something or someone does really nail it. And shoot is like someone who is like not nailing it at all, not cutting it. Just to give us two examples. And I mean, in this case, I think it could be, for example, a brand that you think is really nailing it to be in the Korean market, and some other brand that is not, and they failed, and maybe also why that is. As you at the beginning already talked about Chanel and Sephora, I was thinking, what else can we ask you to give us an example for? So, I mean, I give it to your creativity to give us two examples here.
I think what really kind of comes to mind right now is one of the hottest luxury brands these days. I think it's Loewe. And I think what really makes them, they just opened a store in Korea. And I really loved how there are quite a lot of Korean artists that they have worked with for their Loewe craft price, right? So the store has a blend of a lot of different artists. There is one big installation by a Japanese artist, but they showcase also art by, I believe, two Korean artists. One was a finalist, I think, in 2019, and then one won the prize in 2020. And so there is both the winning artwork, but also the three other ones that complement the winning thing. And so I thought that it was just so amazing the way they did it, where they took traditional Spanish tiles, a lot of traditional Spanish elements, made a statement. We are a Spanish brand, but at the same time, they really also have shown respect to the Korean culture by incorporating this artwork in a lot of different places throughout the space, throughout the store. So I thought that was that's one of the things that really, in terms of Western brands that came here, they were really able to stand out. And I also have to mention Polen Paris, because they did it also very well in incorporating also technology in the store, and then again these elements of craftsmanship when they collaborated with Korean artists, and that was specifically for the store, not for other initiatives like with Loewe. So I think, again, being able to not lose sight of who you are as a brand while being able to localize, I think that's a really beautiful, a very difficult thing also to do, as strategically as a brand, to honor who you are while also honoring the country that you come to.
A great choice. So let's flip the coin.
Yes.
What's not doing so well?
What's your shoot? My shoot. Where do I not even go? I think I wouldn't necessarily call it a shoot per se, but I think that I would love because I'm going to stick to the art element and craftsmanship element, I would love for Prada to do more, because I think they're an amazing brand. They're doing amazing, as a current ecosystem. I think, in the current situation, that it's very difficult for a lot of luxury brands. And they have an art foundation. But I think when I was looking up different initiatives that they did here with current artists, I found something, but it was, you'd think that there would be more, since they do have an art foundation. And I know it's quite separate from the brand itself. It is very focused on art. But again, there could be more. I feel like when I went to Prada, Fondazione Prada in Milan, when I was there in July, I tried looking up, is there anything with a Korean artist? Basically, I might have missed something, but really I haven't seen anything. And I think, especially being such a cultural leader, it would have been amazing for them to showcase that relationship a bit more. So maybe not your traditional doing it really poorly, but I'm sure that they can do better in that sense.
Okay. But thank you for these insights. It's always fascinating to hear the contrasting examples for success and struggle in this context, and it also shows like how dynamic Korea is, right? Like and how differently perceived these brands are.
Yeah, I think that it's really amazing to see is how, it's still a small country and it's a much smaller market than others, but the dedication, because Koreans, there is a study that showed that I think in 2022, I believe Koreans spent more than $300, per capita on luxury, where in the US consumer would have spent 280, I think. And in China it was 50. So in the end, they do spend a lot. I know it's not as big of the market as others, but they showcase their loyalty with their money, and you have to respect that, right? If you want that money. So and I like to. So that's kind of what I like to see. These brands show their dedication by understanding that the Korean art market is gaining in importance. Right now, it's the seventh, or no, again, old data 2022, but in 2022 it was the seventh largest art market in the world, together on the same spot with Spain and Japan. Well, obviously, and also Japan. How long has Japanese culture has been consumed? For a way longer time. So it shows that importance of this market. And I think, like I said, also that hunger for culture that Koreans, I noticed they've had due to the economic progress and kind of culture taking, kind of being the other not so beloved sibling sitting in the back seat, for a long time. And it's great. Koreans, I think, take pride in that shift. They appreciate being appreciated after being the underdog for such a long time. So it makes me happy to see that kind of dedication to the market, especially, like I said, when the Koreans show the dedication with their hard-earned money as well, right? So I think it's only fair to show your commitment, even if it's not your largest market in the world.
Dominika, so final question of the day. In one sentence,
okay,
what would you say is your definition for the future of luxury? Dominika, final question. In one sentence, what would you say is your definition of the future of luxury?
Future of luxury. One sentence. Okay. I think it's a more thoughtful approach after this big growth. I think it's a more thoughtful approach to production, to craftsmanship, again, kind of trying to find a balance between, I understand it's a business, so growth, yes, but make it sustainable, go back to kind of really giving people products when they pay for things that are there to last, and give back, be a patron of cultures and arts. I don't know if that's one sentence, but it's basically be more thoughtful. I think I would really expect, taking into consideration how luxury brands position themselves, as cultural leaders, I would expect more thought being put into the environment, the business environment they create, and also for talent, I think. That's another really important thing, because they do have the luxury of being a very desired market and desired job position. So they have a lot of leverage in that conversation. So I think, yeah, the thought leader that you can be, you position yourself to be, doing for others in all of these different aspects.
Thoughtfulness, a word we should all reflect about. So where can people reach out to you? Where they can talk to you, contact you? What is the best channel to keep up with you besides Kakao?
Yes. So actually, Kakao I keep for private. So in Korea, a lot of people use it for business. I try to keep it separate. So no need to install Kakao to get in touch with me. LinkedIn, I'm there all the time. Definitely LinkedIn, and I'm very responsive. So just feel free to reach out to me, add me, and chat with me. Also, my website, if you just want to see I did create a blog where you have an overview of customer experiences, both for luxury brands in Korea, but also some homegrown brands that I think, again, will give a better picture of what the standard is here, in a sense. Yeah, so the two, definitely, like I said, very responsive on LinkedIn and happy to chat. So that would be the number one.
Perfect, everyone. Reach out to Dominika on LinkedIn. We'll also make the links available so you can know more about the luxury South Korean market. We're grateful to have you, Dominika. Thank you so much for being here and sharing all the insights and especially your passion.
Thank you.